righty. Well, thank you, Heather. And hello to everyone. Great to be here again. And, being here is appreciated by me, having the opportunity. And I'm just really glad people show up and just nice to be here. So, again, as Heather mentioned, what doesn't change with Wi Fi 7 is today's topic. Going to pause here just for a minute and not so much to self promote, but if you take a look down 3 bullets, yes, I am a geezer, 27 years doing networking in general. And the only reason I want to dwell on that is basically I have seen the advent of every wireless standard since 802.11b. It doesn't make me a know-it-all, but it does give me kind of a long game perspective. So when it comes time to talk about stuff like Wi-Fi 7, and I can sound like a Debbie Downer on occasion. I consider it just being a realist, but just want you to know that this comes from a lot of years on the wireless road, not just making it up and throwing it at you. I do have quite the history. And again, that just shapes my perspective. Does not make me a know-it-all, but it lets me pull from a lot of stuff in the past when I talk about specific topics. So hopefully just painting that reference for you. So back to topic. We know that a lot of things do change with Wi-Fi 7. There is a lot to absolutely be excited about. I like the way David Coleman puts it. The biggest part of Wi-Fi 7 is the fact that we're doing 6 gig. That is the absolute big story. We're going to see other parts of the story here in just a second. But the absolute biggest part is the continuation of what we got with 6E. The fact that we are now in this fairly new to us spectrum, 6 gig. That is huge. But even that needs some qualification. So yeah, we have to talk a little bit at first about the highlights of Wi-Fi 7, and then we're going to talk about the actual meat of my offering here. What doesn't change with our new standard? So in 1849, this French dude, Carr, glanced into the future. Maybe he was doing some peyote. He was thinking about wireless, and he said, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And a lot of people have grabbed onto that phrase and they've used it, but I'm telling you, he was talking about Wi-Fi 7 when he said it. He saw things. So, more things change, the more they stay the same, indeed. So we're hearing, depending on what marketing you look at, Wi-Fi 7 is just going to make everything better. We hear that with every standard. The hype, the bluster, something new comes out, and it's just going to be transformative. It will in spots. It is very exciting. I mean, I'm a wireless guy. I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't excited about it. At the same time, no standard is a magic wand. It just doesn't work that way. So we got to be a little more analytical than just getting caught up in the marketing. And before we dig in on the topic, this is stolen from Qualcomm website. The URL is at the bottom of the screen there. Just want to point out a couple of things. Again, this is not to educate on what Wi-Fi 7 is, but we'd be remiss if we didn't at least talk about the highlights of it. So this seemed like as good of a graphic as any. Really want you to look at the left to begin with, and just to kind of call out some of the marketing things that are just to me, I don't want to say silly, but boy, they just aren't also really true, or at least they're not functionally true, in that they're not absolutely true. That's a better descriptor. So under the 320 megahertz channel bandwidth, yeah, that bandwidth itself is something that Wi-Fi 7 allows, but take a look at the description. We're going to deliver massive throughput gains thanks to a wider channel and capacity gains from that 6 gig spectrum. Wi-Fi 7 can deliver peak rates of over 40 gigabits, a 4 times increase over Wi-Fi 6E, which implies Wi-Fi 6E was giving us 10 gigabits. And I ask you, is anybody seeing that on Wi-Fi 6E? This whole thing is just, it's just takes the best parts of the standard and it kind of articulates it to the uneducated masses as if it were gospel and as if every Wi-Fi 7 connection was going to give you this. And it just doesn't work that way, as probably, I'm guessing, almost everybody listening knows. So, you know, we're just bombarded with this. And we have to kind of, you know, use our own educated wireless professional filtering to kind of find the truth in all of this. It's always been that way. It just, you know, kind of is what it is. MLO, the multi-link operation. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it really works and how good it works and how often it can be employed. I'm seeing some of my fellow professionals that occasionally take a microphone and pontificate, expressing great skepticism. I've also seen it shown in demo in like lab settings, and it's pretty neat to see it. But I've also seen a lot of skepticism about how achievable it's going to be in the real world, you know, day to day. So again, grain of salt. It's not going to just happen with every connection on day one. 4K QAM, you know, our modulation that gets us the really high speeds, whatever those speeds may be. And they're not going to be 40 gig per second, I promise that. But, you know, whatever they end up being, it's going to be better, but it's also going to be nebulous, really hard to define. And to get to 4K, it ain't happening unless, again, you're in the absolute optimal conditions. And the real world often is not, you know, perfect. So all of this is just kind of same thing with FCU at the end there. All of this is going to be wait and see. And to be honest, I haven't had enough coffee in me to remember if FCU, the flexible channel utilization, if that's something that is clearly spelled out in the standard, how to do it, or if it's one of those things that is quote unquote allowed, and then every vendor decides how they're going to implement it. And if that's the case, you know, who the heck knows how it's really going to turn out. There's a lot more to Wi-Fi 7. Again, I just kind of took the tip of the iceberg from the feature perspective to get us started. Now, all of this is great stuff, right? It's evolution, it's innovation, it's the IEEE doing what they do, figuring out how to, you know, come up with something that can happen at its best, but whether it does happen at its best, you know, the crystal is pretty murky on that. There is a lot to be excited about. And again, I'm saying that half seriously, half tongue in cheek. Yes, there is a lot to be excited about. At the same time, it's not the way it's being presented, right? Just beat that horse a little, make it a little deader here. Going to get off the chart speeds. You can do 16 by 16 spatial streams, super low latency, those wide channels, you know, big time QAM, QAM, the modulation, MLO, and then, you know, the silliness at the bottom bullet there. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. It's all just fantastic, right? Alas, you know, as always, the hype wave goes up, the hype wave has to come down. There's a reality check ahead. Wi-Fi 7 is 802.11be, also called EHT, extremely high throughput. It's phenomenal on paper. The last two slides, last two or three slides just showed you all of the crazy, wonderful stuff that's allowed. Will it be achieved? You know, check back with us in a year or two, and we'll see where we're at. But the IEEE basically handed us an impressive load of potential. And as with every other standard that came before, it's up to us as the wireless professionals. We have to cut through the fog. That is on us. Sorry about that. Coffee going down a little bit wrong. I can tell you that absolutely, and I'm hearing more and more people say it, 16 by 16 clients are spelled out in the standard. There ain't going to be no 16 by 16 clients, especially, you know, when we think about the vast majority of clients are going to be mobile devices. And then they talk about, one of the big, hurrahs about Wi-Fi 7 is things like virtual reality. You're not putting 16 streams in your typical consumer grade VR headset. So I think 16 by 16 you can pretty much take away from the list. And once you do that, all of the other stuff kind of dials itself back as far as potential speeds and everything. Um, and as always, the most important parts of the standard, I mentioned it before, the need for optimal conditions. Real world seldom optional, right? Going to be gains. The mere fact that we're in 6 gig using that big swath of new spectrum, that is the story. The features, they kind of are, nice footnotes to the story, and they're all interesting. But 6 gig itself is the big news. All right. But as exciting as all of that is, we still have, baggage, legacy baggage, whatever you want to call it, precedent. And maybe that's the better word. These bags have been with us since 802.11b became G and then A, and then N came along, and then came along AC, and finally, we got up to X and then BE, right? So, the bags kind of get a little more in quantity, and they get piled a little higher. They're just not going anywhere. And let's talk about what those bags amount to. All right. Start off with, again, what might sound like negativity, and it's not meant to be. It's more of a, like I say, it's a reality check. It's being analytical. It's zooming out. It's looking at the whole story of Wi-Fi 7. It's really not throwing dirt on it as a technology. Already promised I'm excited about it too. But we have to be realistic and analytic. We owe that to the people who use our networks and who ask us questions about wireless networking. So, one of the things I ponder, and this is just not meant to be anything other than a kind of a, arbitrarily chosen slice of pie there. Right now, in my environment, where I do have a lot of 6 gig running on 6E access points, and I have thousands of them out there. My environment isn't completely changed over yet, but the most penetration I see right now is 10 gig, or 10% of my clients doing 6 gig. That's on a good day. I have heard other people say, oh, I'm getting 30, 40, 50%. Whatever that slice of pie is, it's going to depend on what kind of clients you have, the security you're doing on your network, whether you've taken the plunge and been able to upgrade a large network to 6 gig. Everybody's circumstances are going to be a little bit different. This is my current slice of pie myself. How long until my 10% of clients that are doing 6 gig? How long is it going to take for me to see 20, 30, 40, 50, 70%, right? I'm guessing a few years. And the reason that's important is you can't get Wi-Fi 7 benefits, all of the Wi-Fi 7 benefits, if you're not a Wi-Fi 7 client. Wi-Fi 7 will provide a better environment for even legacy clients to a certain degree. But the big payoff, like back on that Qualcomm slide, the client's got to match the infrastructure if you really want to get the big payoff. So I'm saying, as wonderful as it is, and even if everything were to come true the way the standards are presented, and it's not going to, but even if it could, it's going to take a while to get there because the clients don't just magically replace themselves on day one. Just because Wi-Fi 7 is here, it doesn't mean the 40,000 clients in my environment all suddenly become Wi-Fi 7 clients. That's just not the way things work either. And then we talk about what doesn't change. with Wi-Fi 7 specifically, right? We have this history of that first bullet, and I was kind of shocked to hear how much of that was articulated at the WLPC conference I was at last week. If you're not familiar, the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference is kind of like the mecca of conferences for people who do wireless. You know, it's by wireless people for wireless people. I'm not trying to promote the conference. I'm just trying to let you know what it's about. It's not a lot of vendor, promotion and all of that. It's wireless professionals sharing what they're dealing with, what they're experiencing, how they see the future. There's some pretty good luminaries that get out there and talk. Again, David Coleman was one of them, and he was talking about Wi-Fi 7. There's others, but David has a lot of good recorded talks on it if you want to go out and look for him. But the notion, for somebody to sit up there, we have this published standard. The IEEE has put out this published standard. You got the entire industry getting ready to make a lot of money off the standard, and at the same time, we have voices like David, recognized gurus, if you will, standing up on stage, and the phrase, we're gonna have to see how this all plays out. We're just gonna have to see where this goes. It's just so crazy. You take an Ethernet standard, it's gonna be 10 gig. There's no mystery. 10 gig is 10 gig. Good wiring gets you 10 gig. Here, and there's not a lot of variability. There's not a lot of, it's kind of boring. The wired standards are. There's not a lot of if this, then that. And then if the wind blows, this just changed, so that just changed. It's really bizarre to be standing like on day 1 or 2 of a standard, and nobody can really tell you how it's going to be 6 months down the road or a year down the road, while people figure out how to implement and if they can implement the specific parts of it. That is just still strikes me as so strange after this many years. But you go back to 802.11n, that standard allowed 4x4 clients. Never saw any 802.11n 4x4 clients, right? That's what I'm talking about. We're just going to have to see how this plays out. That is so strange, but it's also a fact of life for wireless standards especially. So the second bullet there, a new standard, only adds to the mishmash of client devices, right? New clients, Windows as an operating system has not gotten particularly better in my experience and in my esteem when it comes to things like drivers and just oddball things that you have to tweak to make this system better. And now you've got one more wireless standard in the mix. It gives one more permutation to your devices that you're going to have to just contend with and fix and resolve and figure out how to make go. Also, just a couple of examples of when I say this mishmash of client devices and this cesspool of dysfunction. Here, if I sound negative, it's purposeful. I am just astounded at the mess that has become the overall wireless client device pool. Right now, Oculus, the whole virtual reality thing, fascinating technology. How many of us really want to run MDNS on our large wireless networks? It can be done with a lot of network tricks, and then it's got to be carefully tended to. And if you don't do it right, it can send your network, wired and wireless, into a tailspin, depending on how sloppy you are with it at scale. So this virtual reality is coming out built completely on living room quality network protocols, but the visions are huge for it to be everywhere in the enterprise. We kind of saw the same thing with Google Glass, right? Google Glass could not do any kind of enterprise security, but everybody saw it as being a big player in the enterprise. Surgeons are going to wear it in the operating room, okay? And it's all going to run on a PSK network. Things just don't make sense sometimes, or at least they don't, line up with common sense. Printers. We still don't have any enterprise printers, or very, 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 very few enterprise printers that can do 802.11x. Talked about the drivers. We see even like with AX networks where the AC is backwards compatible, or the network itself is backwards compatible with the AC clients. We have AC clients that can't see the network if AX is present until you update the driver, and then maybe have to update it again because there's 20 drivers that came out to fix the problem. And then Microsoft just threw us a zinger late last year where if you were running 802.11r, clients couldn't see the network, and then Microsoft had to fix that. It is just absolutely a mess, and it's just that is not going to change in 802.11be. The Wi-Fi 7 excuse me, is just going to exasperate that. It's nothing we haven't dealt with before. It just is what it is. The backwards compatibility thing, right? So Wi-Fi 7 and 6E, 6 gig helps a little bit. There's not any of the backwards compatibility nonsense in 6 gig, but Wi-Fi 7 is a tri-band technology. 2.4 and 5 gig are also part of Wi-Fi 7. 6 gig is the sexy part, it's the exciting part, but the backwards compatibility stuff, the IEEE still hasn't seen fit to see the wisdom of killing off this whole notion of backwards compatibility. So all of our management traffic ends up at these slow legacy rates. The vast majority of us as Wi-Fi administrators and Wi-Fi system configuration professional people, we tend to turn off backwards compatibility. We kill off the slow rates. We scoff at new devices that come in that might still need 802.11b. It's like, no, we've left that behind by 8 or 10 years, yet the IEEE refuses to join us. It is just a mess. Again, talking about clients specifically. One thing that's really interesting, and again, I heard some of it last week at WLPC. Let me take you back to that Qualcomm slide. They're promising us 40 gig data rates on the AP. Well, what does that mean for uplink back to the LAN switch? 20, 30 gig? Well, no. You may not even need still a gig. Maybe worse, you need 2.5 gig. Okay. Explain those numbers to me. Yeah, it's just so crazy. And again, this is not new. We've been told we need M gig for how many generations? And last week, somebody on stage said, and finally, we need M gig. But then there's equal amounts of skepticism whether you really will or will, in all cases. We'll see. We'll see if we finally start topping gig faithfully on the Ethernet side. I hope we do. We have to move that needle sooner or later and actually start realizing some of these promised benefits that, just are kind of slow to come to us with these new standards. And the same thing with PoE. Do you need the, something that can give you 60 watts for these new APs? Are the vendors going to try to still keep it below 30? Going to vary vendor by vendor. So this is not new confusion. This is not new stuff to have to sort through. Also, not changing with Wi-Fi 7. The need for quality design, right? 6 gig is going to be generally smaller. And if you're trying to use those wide channels, you're going to need really, really good SNR. Doesn't matter the specifics, the need for a quality design does not change. Nothing in Wi-Fi 7 inherently lets you off the hook for good design. Skills required for support and troubleshooting. I know that there are companies that are trying to now make it so, you send us some money and we will do everything and you don't have to think about anything. And the whole networking as a service thing, personally, don't quite buy it as presented so far, you're going to need to know what the heck you're doing to keep this thing going, or rely on people who do. I don't know if you can surrender your in-house wireless knowledge in any way, shape, or form. And especially, those who are coming to service Wi-Fi 7, if you choose to buy into the as a service thing, hopefully they actually understand Wi-Fi 7 and they're not stuck somewhere back in 11n. So the need to evolve your skills, whoever is supporting your network, the skills are going to need to evolve, or some problems are not going to get solved, or there's going to be rabbit holes gone down needlessly. So the skills paradigm doesn't change. The requirements for good physical layer underpinnings, cabling is a component in the networking equation, and as your promised wireless throughputs and speeds go up, bad cable ideally would identify itself, because you should start seeing errors on bad cable because the wireless is running faster than the wire if the wire is put in wrong. If I probably didn't say that very eloquently, but basically the wiring paradigm has to up its game because the wireless paradigm is upping its game. And you don't want your wiring to be capable but installed wrong, so it's creating bottlenecks. That doesn't go away. You can't buy cheap offshore, 300-foot patch cables and expect them to push, M-gig and, without certification of the cable, etc. Cable gets all that more important with Wi-Fi 7. It's always been important. It just gets more important. And breaking news, this is still RF. We're still in the domain where it's in the air and it's subject to interference, whether it's 2.4, 5, or 6 gig. Yes, there are things that can interfere with 6 gig. Thankfully, they're far less than what we have, potentially interfering in 2.4 and 5. At the same time, as 6 gig gets more popular, you do run the risk in dense environments where your dense environment bumps up against somebody else's dense environment, like in an office park or whatever. If you're actually using the wider channels that Wi-Fi 7 says you can use, you're going to be bumping into people. It's still RF. Ultimately, even if it takes a while to get there, from the usage perspective, sooner or later, we're going to be looking at 6 gig with the same, oh my God, are we getting interfered with, kind of questions that we look at 2.4 and 5 gig with. Again, may not happen immediately, but we have to recognize that this is still RF, and 6 gig in Wi-Fi 7 isn't doing anything magical to safeguard it against interference. It can't. It's just not the way that wireless works. And then one of my favorites, code issues, right? When I say code, I'm talking about the underlying code that runs your access points, the cloud controller, whatever is on the other end. If you still have physical controllers, the wireless network is only as good as the code that is underneath it all. And nowadays, we have more and more people trying to throw AI into the mix as if that were some grand panacea. And it really isn't. Just like with the underlying code, the non-AI involved code, you throw AI in the mix. AI is a building block. It's a tool. It's not some, magic bean that you plant and it grows this crazy wireless network that's infallible. If people have coded the AI poorly, or if they've implemented it poorly into the code, it's just going to be one more page in the book of code frustration. So none of that goes away. It's still, what comes out of the antennas on the AP is still at the mercy of, how well the vendor slowed down their development and did a good job fixing problems before introducing new problems. This goes back to day one in Wi-Fi, and it hasn't changed. You got vendors that tend to do it right, from the start, vendors that tend to react quicker when problems are discovered, and it's just kind of all over the place for code stuff. But again, Wi-Fi 7 does not change that in the least. It is always right when we go down this road that we're all starting to go down, even if we're not putting out Wi-Fi 7 on day one. If we give it a year, give it 2 years, whatever, let other people do the bleeding edge thing and get burned, while we just take it all in and hopefully learn from other people, or whether we have compelling reasons to jump in on day one. The vendor makes us some sweet deal to get us to be an early adopter, whatever. Marketing is going to have an absolute field day like never before with Wi-Fi 7. That is already becoming obvious to me. I'm guessing it's becoming obvious to a lot of you guys out there listening. But it's our job to sort it out. It's our job to make it work. That's another thing that doesn't change. we're the people that have to digest the intel and figure out where we can really go with it, and then educate the people that we work for and the people that want to use this magic, wonderful new thing, and help them to understand what reality is. That is incumbent upon us. So as we get to the closing, kind of started you with a quote. Even though I'm not particularly, religious, I do like, I do like the saying, "There's no new thing under the sun." So this comes out of Bible book Ecclesiastes 1:9, and I just modified it a little bit. There is nothing new under the wireless sun, right? Even if it seems new and shiny and exciting, if you kind of zoom out, yeah, we've dealt with a lot of this before. The technology supposedly is better, and on paper it's better, and on paper it's better hugely, but now we have to see what hugely translates to in the light of day. Maybe hugely is some, a little. I mean, it's all going to depend on your own environment and what you're able to extract out of what the standard allows and what's actually practically applicable in each one of our environments. But even doing that exercise, there's nothing new there. And with that, we'll see if we have time for discussion.
We certainly do. And we've got a few in here. So first of all, thank you, Lee. Lots of great feedback, lots of chatter going on. First question is from Anders. Was your take, Lee, that future Wi-Fi 7 certified devices should or must support both LPI and SP?
For outside, I would hope they would be as versatile as they can be. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. The outside part. I'm thinking of a presentation in the outside and the channel coordination and all of that. But absolutely, I would hope that they would be as absolutely flexible as possible. To not be able to do both power paradigms would be a disservice to the person buying the device, and to not clearly state what it can do and can't do, which I'm sure they all will, wink wink, is really a disservice. It's really a weird little niche, and I hope that it resolves itself within the industry pretty quick. The whole power paradigm with 6 gig clients. I hope we're not stuck with just this mess that runs on and bites people for very long.
Mm-hmm. Okay, he kind of has a follow-up here. Maybe we should address the compatibility issues with SSID doing Wi-Fi 7 and MLO. Older devices may not like it.
Yeah, is it a comment or a question?
It's kind of just like a comment in addition to that.
Yeah, and again, I think if I understand what's being said or asked or whatever, I think it's so early. It does come down to, well, how did the vendor implement it? What happens at the driver level, and are we going to see Macs that can just understand it all and use the best of what they can use, and everything else they just adapt to, and Windows machines that don't from Intel, but they do from Broadcom. And I think some of that stuff with MLO is just so early. I think it's all just wild speculation right now, at least based on what I see and read. So I absolutely am not offering an authoritative take on it, just what I expect.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm gonna try to pronounce his name correctly. Waldock. I'm just gonna go with that. Asks what use case exists or will come in the immediate future that can push the need for APs to support bandwidths greater than 1 GB?
Yeah, great question. Well, you need to download 100 cat videos really quick before you get on the airport. That's
Done.
important. But that being said, my smart alecky response aside, they really, VR is the thing that they're touting big time. I guess somebody is envisioning we're all going to be walking around with, VR headsets, and that's huge. Maybe it will turn out to be that big, but virtual reality absolutely is one of the main things that's getting pushed. I played with it a little bit enough to know that it is super cool, and I can see how it could be transformative practically, not just fun, but practically in a lot of cases. So, but there's also going to be varying degrees of that. How polished do you need it? How graphics intensive and speed hungry is that VR application? I mean, not all VR is going to be created equal, just like not all AI is created equal. So, aside from VR, you know, APs that can do more than a gig, dense environments with a lot of busy clients doing whatever they're doing. The VR thing is more of tends to be presented as more, I'm doing VR to the AP. Well, what if 20 of us are doing VR to an AP? That could get pretty hungry. So, to me, more bandwidth on the Ethernet side is always um, desirable, as long as you can prove that it may likely be needed. But it would really suck to me to go into Wi-Fi 7 and have somebody say, "Oh no, all you need is a gig," because that means everything on the other side of that AP, and an AP is just a bridge, Ethernet on one side, 802.3 on one side, 802.11. Everything on the other side of that bridge is a lie if I don't need more than a gig. So I really hope somebody can, mathematically prove, and this is why you need it, and present that in the marketing that isn't, that stands up to the light of day.
Mm-hmm. All right. Great. So, Larry, first of all, thanks you for the presentation. Larry says, I'm new to wireless technology. I'm going through some online content to study. I would like to request some advice on how I could get guidance related to wireless study and discuss some concepts that I need. Sorry, trying to read this on the spot. They're just looking for some resources. I bet the first one's going to be CWNP. But what else you got?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything starts with CWNP. Everything starts with, because it's vendor neutral. It tends to be very, very good, especially the CWNA. Besides that, Seven Signal does have a fantastic library, etc. And beyond that, to me, there's the general question. I want to learn about wireless. And then if there's any specific topic, you're going to find, your Google foo is going to take you to the same names frequently that have probably answered your question in advance. There's people like Rasika, who I can never remember his last name. His blog will be one of the first ones that come up for probably 8 out of 10 wireless questions you're ever going to search for. And he's a genius. If you're looking for packet capture stuff with wireless, you're going to find yourself, looking at something Peter McKenzie has come out with. There are a couple other people who just specialize in that. So for the general, CWNP, 7 Signal Library, other repositories like that, and then for the specific, once you start looking around, you're going to find out who the heavy hitters are out there that are just providing content out of the goodness of their own heart and their love of the industry and promoting wireless altruistically.
Yep. And I see your mud in the chat here. If you're not in the Wi-Fi Pro Slack, that's also a good place to kind of ask questions, resources, all that good stuff. And Larry,
Yeah,
if you need me to
excellent.
send you that link, I can do that. Just respond to the email tomorrow and I'll do that for you.
Yeah, excellent point.
Yep.
The only thing I would say to that too is just the other, the caveat is a lot of personality in the wireless community and a lot of declarations, pound the table, 2.4 gig is dead. If anybody is talking in absolutes about anything, run the other way. That doesn't discount everything that person says, but if anybody is giving you an absolute on anything, it has to be this way. No, it doesn't. Wireless is so variable and environments are so different. That's one of the things you got to learn right up front. Just the little wireless bubble you're living in is different from my bubble. It's different from Heather's bubble. We all have our own little what's going on, and there is no absolutes.
Right. Eddie, talking about 5G. Does 5G, thinking T-Mobile 2.5 gigahertz or 600 megahertz, fill in any of those use cases for VR, Google Glass type devices more efficiently than typical Wi-Fi? It seems to be a hot topic, the 5G.
Oh, yeah, it's a great question, too. And it should. And I find CBRS, I think we're talking about private 5G, I think. Doesn't really matter. Whatever. I'm going to keep it to private 5G. So if we're talking about private 5G, there are so many devices that need it, but they're niche devices that just don't have it. I think the CBRS industry is trying to displace wireless, even though Wi-Fi, even though they say it's a complementary technology. You go into a stadium, one of the absolute first devices that would benefit from CBRS is the ticket scanners at the gate. Most of them use Wi-Fi. Wouldn't it be nice to take those utility devices and get them out of the Wi-Fi mix and get them onto CBRS? They don't have them. There's not a single model out there. It's like, why is not the device makers hearing from end users and looking for targeted cases rather than just trying to be yet another network that we all buy? I don't get it. But yeah, there are some things that would be better suited, not in Wi-Fi, but for that to happen, the 5G, private 5G vendors need to work with the device makers and say, okay, that thing really needs to have CBRS built into it, and here's why, and let's work together to get it there. I just don't see a tremendous amount of that happening myself.
Yeah.